Coming up, demonstrators march through Iowa City for human rights. And later, changes come to postpartum care in Iowa.
A century-old bill shakes up Arizona.
All that in a profile on a presidential candidate, along with important dates this week in history, along with making sure your facts are straight.
Also, where presidential candidates are during their campaign trails, the latest from the polls, and something for you to consider.
Good evening and welcome to The Update, your home for news and politics.
From the local level to nationwide, we're keeping you up to date. I'm Cara Dulin.
And I'm Jordan Tovar. Now, as you can see here, things look a little different this week for all you loyal Update listeners and viewers at home, because we have Johnny missing. And you may be wondering, where's Johnny at? Well, he's in our nation's capital in Washington, D.C., and I have as my co-host this week, Cara Dulin. So for now, we're going to send it out to Washington, D.C., where Johnny has been this past week in D.C. covering politicians.
Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley here in Washington, D.C. is looking to catch a glimpse of the Farm Bill going forward despite getting pushed back by the Senate.
I have another one-year extension, so the 2018 Farm Bill will now is its 6th year. I think it'll be in its 7th year and hopefully get a 5-year Farm Bill passed.
But Grassley's hopes of another extension to the 2018 Farm Bill has run into hurdles. The biggest issue with the current bill is the growing inflation to biodiesel, fertilizer, seeds, and other resources a farmer would need.
And so the prices that were set in the 2018 Farm Bill doesn't reflect that. We need to have a reflection of the inflation.
While Senate Leader Chuck Schumer didn't address the bill as a top priority in the coming weeks and months for the Senate, the bill's extension has also been lacking bipartisan support.
I also urge Speaker Johnson and House Republicans to snap out of their paralysis and pass the Senate's National Security Supplemental.
Senate Democrats have shut down 2 proposals surrounding the limits for reducing inflation for farmer resources.
That the House may put out a Farm Bill. I think that's good news that they would do that, and I'm glad that they're doing it, but I don't think it's going to impact until we get a bipartisan agreement here in the United States Senate.
The current deadline for a new Farm Bill or extension to the current one is slated for September 30th of this year. While things continue to stay busy here in Washington, D.C., an Iowa Congresswoman is stepping up here at the Longworth House office, where she is stepping up in leadership to get conservative climate action further in the House of Representatives.
So you really do have a strong environmental focus within within Iowa in and of itself.
With founder Utah Representative John Curtis stepping away from leading the caucus, Miller Meeks will be filling his spot as she will be leaving her vice chair position. As leader of the caucus, Meeks wants to focus on reducing emissions while also building an economy that can reinvest into a healthier planet.
Overall, I think we need to have a cleaner, healthier planet that we leave to our children and grandchildren. But we need to be able to compete economically around the globe in a globally competitive environment.
Meeks is not a fan of President Biden's energy policies, believing they are hurting what America should be doing to improve the climate of the planet.
We also know that America's natural gas is 40% cleaner, and there are countries who want our natural gas, which is why the president's ban on exports on natural gas is very concerning, because by exporting our cleaner natural gas, we can reduce global emissions.
As an Iowa representative, the impact she's seen in the state is what propelled her into leading the caucus.
It is very forward-thinking, and we have done it without mandates and without emission guidance.
Marionette Miller Meeks and Ashley Hinson also both spoke on the possible removal of Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. In March, Congress passed a spending bill which had been pushed back for months to avoid a government shutdown. As a response, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene sent forth a motion to vacate the Speaker of the House.
This is difficult to do. This is not what I would like to be doing, but I believe it's necessary.
And while a formal vote to vacate Speaker of the House Mike Johnson from his position has not made it to the House of Representatives floor, Iowa congresswomen have said that they will not support the ousting of Johnson.
I would not support a motion to vacate the Speaker. I don't think it helps us to govern and to legislate and to do the job that we're elected to do by the American people.
I came here to push back against the chaos and dysfunction, not support it, and I do not want to see another speaker fight on the floor. We need to govern.
Yet some Republicans don't share the same viewpoint with the House of Representatives.
But most of the members I've talked to agree with what I've said. They may not come out and publicly say it. Many are relieved I've said it, and I've even heard within the ranks of leadership there's agreement there.
Other Republicans, though, are trying to push through the split government and do what they feel is best for the party.
And I think we need to push back every chance we can against policies we don't agree with, but ousting our speaker isn't the answer here. Changing the administration and changing leadership in the Senate is.
With pressing matters of business, including aid for the Francis Scott Key Bridge, Pfizer, and FFA reforms, along with others, Meeks wants to focus on the task at hand.
So we have some very important things that we need to get done, and I think our time should be focused on those things that are going to impact the American people the most and that they want to see done.
I'll also be talking to Senator Joni Ernst tomorrow, and I'll have more for you next week when I return to Iowa City. From Washington, D.C., Johnny Valtman, DITV.
And you know, Jordan, it's super cool that Johnny's able to tell us everything that's going on in the nation's capital, but I'm sure there's lots of stuff going on locally as well.
Well, yeah, Cara, I mean, this week we've got a little bit more variety than from just protests, but I'll still be talking about a protest, but we've got some motion going on in the Board of Supervisors. So the Johnson County Board of Supervisors have unanimously voted to up the minimum wage from $12.25 to $12.64 per hour. This was done largely symbolically as the county looks to make living more affordable within Johnson County. Now, former Iowa Governor Terry Branstad signed a bill in 2017 that limits local areas from raising the minimum wage from the state and federal rate of $7.25 per hour. Now, despite this, the board has raised the minimum wage $5 over the last 7 years, although it can only be a recommendation to businesses at this time. Following up on a story from our show last week, demonstrators gathered for a, quote, Trans Day of Revenge march through the streets of Iowa City. I was there covering the march from start to finish with reactions from the public. People gathered on the Pentecrest on Wednesday night for, quote, Trans Day of Revenge, where attendees dressed in all black with masks to conceal their identities. Without much talk of the event, it left some passerbys confused.
I will say when I walked out here, I didn't know what it was, and based on their outfits, I mean, they're wearing all black. I thought it was an Antifa rally.
I came out of the exam, so I had no idea that this was going to transpire.
Around 8 p.m., after a group had gathered, attendees began their march towards downtown Iowa City for their demonstrations against local and state officials. But first, they stopped at Iowa City City Hall.
We expect better from our city employees and our elected officials when it comes to defending trans people.
Gathered at City Hall, demonstrators prepared to and then burned the state flag of Iowa in opposition to legislation involving the rights of trans people, and then continued on to their next destination.
They think that they're exercising their First Amendment rights to speak out against people who are endangering the trans community, not supporting the trans community, and are giving a bad name to us without actually listening to our voices.
As those gathered returned, they continued their hope for the rights of trans people in Iowa for the future. From the Pentecrest, Jordan Tovar, DITV. So, of course, there's always a lot going on around the local level, but Cara, I think recently there's been some developments around the state.
Oh, absolutely, Jordan. And we've also got some new laws in play, including a new law that will waive state testing and graduation requirements for students at Perry Community School District. Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds signed the bill last week as a way to provide additional support to the community following the fatal shooting in the district in January. The shooting resulted in the deaths of a 6th grader and a principal and wounded several others. In addition to waiving the testing and graduation requirements, the law also waives the required number of days or hours for instruction, any reporting requirement related to accreditation, the administration of any requirement related to dynamic learning assessment, and the administration of any assessment related to English language learners. The bill also allows the district to use special property tax dollars to cover retention bonus payments for staff. In a news release, Reynolds said, quote, as the Perry Community School District continues to heal, this legislation will provide students, teachers, and staff with an additional layer of support, allowing them the flexibility they need to care for themselves and each other, end quote. And care for new mothers may be changing in Iowa as a new bill passed by the Iowa Senate will reshape postpartum Medicaid coverage. The bill will extend Medicaid coverage from the current timeframe of 60 days to 12 months. In spite of the extension, the bill remains controversial, as it would also lower income limits for pregnant people to qualify. Currently, for a person to qualify for coverage, their income must be below 375% of the federal poverty level. The bill would decrease that to 215%, meaning an estimated 1,300 mothers would no longer qualify for Medicaid each month. The bill is currently awaiting Reynolds' signature.
So, Cara, as you mentioned in your state update, you talked about birth rights, and I think Jayce has a little more on those.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And now we'll send it out to the newsroom where DITV's Jayce Bertrand is going to give us a rundown of what's going on around the nation.
Thanks, Cara. And Arizona has made major changes to its stance on abortion. In a 4-2 ruling, the Arizona Supreme Court decided that the state must follow a 160-year-old law that bans abortion. Notably, this law was passed in 1860, over 50 years before Arizona became a state in 1912. Under this reinstated law, all abortions are banned in Arizona except for cases which threaten the life of the mother. Arizona is just the most recent of states to ban abortion following the Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade in 2022. The political fallout of this ruling has been palpable. Democrats have almost unanimously denounced the decision, while former President Donald Trump stated that the ruling went, quote, too far. This comes after Trump stated his belief that abortion should be up to the states to decide on. Arizona Attorney General Chris Mays also announced that she would not enforce the ban.
Everything is on the table right now for us, and it's time to fight. Arizonans want us to fight back against this extreme, draconian, Civil War era abortion ban that was passed at a time when Arizona wasn't a state, the Civil War was still raging, and women couldn't even vote.
And with mixed reactions coming from both sides of the aisle, it seems that the decision on abortion will ultimately fall upon voters this November. And now I'm going to send it back to Cara and Jordan in the studio.
Thanks, Jay. So for the past couple weeks, you've seen on the update that we've had our reporter Grace Lathrop out there, but this week we brought on someone different.
Oh yeah, and we are super excited to have Ryan Lynch back this week to give us a profile on a presidential candidate.
Thanks, Cara. And this week's candidate profile is independent presidential candidate Cornel West. West was born on June 2nd of 1953 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and grew up in California. He graduated from Harvard magna cum laude and got his master's and doctorate in philosophy from Princeton, being the first black person to get a PhD from the university. He has worked as a professor of philosophy at both Harvard and Princeton and has written books such as Race Matters and Democracy Matters. West sees 2024 as a time of, quote, moral bankruptcy and spiritual obscenity driven by a derelict duopoly of both major parties that equally places profits over people and the planet, unquote, according to his campaign website. Running as an independent provides West a way to have his own campaign uninfluenced by the outside groups associated with political parties. And while he has been an outspoken and acted as a political activist, he is yet to hold any political office. And now I'll send it back over to you, Jordan and Cara.
Thanks, Ryan. So speaking of candidates, the presidential candidates have been making some big talk this week.
For sure, Biden and Trump are both making some pretty big statements vying for the support of different groups. For example, in a visit to Wisconsin on Monday, President Biden unveiled something that might make his campaign a little more attractive to college graduates, his new student loan forgiveness program. His new proposal would cancel at least some debt for over 30 million Americans. This plan is different from his last one, which was rejected by the Supreme Court. Biden's new plan uses a different legal justification, since with his last one, SCOTUS said that he overstepped his authority. This plan uses the Higher Education Act, which gives the Secretary of Education the power to waive student loan debt in certain circumstances.
Too many Americans, especially young people, are saddled with unsustainable debts in exchange for a college degree. It's not just a drag on them, it's a drag on our local economies.
The new proposal has 5 categories of eligibility, with the biggest being borrowers who have seen their debt grow because of interest. These borrowers could get up to $20,000 in student loans forgiven, and this category comprises about 25 million people. The Education Department says it will release a formal proposal in the coming months, but if anything does come of this revised plan, it could still be a while before anyone sees their debt being forgiven. And although the Biden administration has said they feel confident with the legality of this plan, a Trump victory in November would almost certainly shut it down. And Donald Trump is making his stance on a contentious issue kind of clear. For weeks, Trump has been dodging questions on abortion, but this morning he finally gave his firmest response to date on the topic when he said he would not sign a federal abortion ban if he were to be elected in November.
Lord Bible? Would you sign an actual abortion ban if Congress had to do that? Would you sign it?
This follows a statement he made in a video on his social platform, Truth Social, on Monday, where he suggested that abortion decisions should be left up to individual states.
My view is now that we have abortion where everybody wanted it from a legal standpoint, the states will determine by vote or legislation or perhaps both, and whatever they decide must be the law of the land.
In the video, he also took credit for the reversal of Roe v. Wade in 2022. This statement had the simultaneous effect of angering conservatives who believe abortion should be restricted at the federal level and progressives who believe it should be protected at the federal level. Right now, it's not clear the effect this will ultimately have on Trump's campaign, but if anything's certain, it's that abortion will be a crucial issue as we head into the presidential election. And now with all this uncertainty about how people are going to take Trump's statements, it'll be interesting to see how it affects him at the polls.
Yes, and with some news on those polls, we're going to send it back to Ryan, who has our poll watch for this week.
Thanks, Jordan. And now it is about 2 weeks since Robert F. Kennedy Jr. chose Nicole Shanahan to be his running mate. So for this week's poll watch, we'll look at how it has impacted the latest polls. And now the most direct benefactor is, of course, RFK, as he has seen an increase of about 8% since naming his VP. RFK's increased numbers are actively impacting the main Trump-Biden rematch. Trump and Biden continue to fight in a tight battle, with poll numbers changing frequently. However, there is some consistency present, as Kennedy's momentum is mostly drawing votes away from the current president. And our candidate of the week, Cornel West, is not seeing the same success RFK is currently enjoying, sitting at only 2% in the polls. And RFK will look to continue a positive trajectory in the polls, while the former President Trump is still yet to announce a running mate. Now I'll send it back over to you, Jordan and Cara.
Thanks, Ryan. So since Johnny's gone this week, I'm the one in charge of the show. And, I was just having such a hard time coming up who was going to do This Week in History.
Oh yeah, and then you know what? Our very own Jayce Bertrand was just chomping at the bit to share some history with you guys, so we're going to send it back out to him in the newsroom.
Thanks, guys. And yeah, I am filling in for Johnny this week, but luckily I'm a bit more of a history buff than he is, so let's get right into it. On April 8, 1864, the Senate voted to pass the 13th Amendment, officially banning slavery in the United States. On April 9, 1865, Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Union General Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, bringing the Civil War to an official end. Notably, Grant went against his, quote, unconditional surrender mantra, allowing all Confederate soldiers to return home under the condition they lay down all arms. On April 9th, 2003, the Iraqi capital of Baghdad fell to U.S. forces as part of the American operation to remove former ally Saddam Hussein from power. Outside the 1917 siege of Baghdad during World War I, the last time the ancient city fell to foreign invaders was in 1733. On April 10, 1938, the Anschluss was approved after Germany invaded Austria, uniting the two countries. This was a major step towards the Second World War, which began a few months later after Germany invaded Poland. Also on April 10th, in 1998, the Good Friday Agreement was signed in Northern Ireland, calling for a devolved government in the region. Brokered by the U.S., this agreement brought an end to the 30-year-long Troubles, an era of violence, guerrilla warfare, and terrorism in Northern Ireland as part of the Irish Republican Army's efforts to unify the region with the Republic of Ireland, and the Ulster Volunteer Force's efforts against the unification. Now, I could talk forever about the Troubles and Northern Ireland, but we only have so much time for now, so I'm going to send back to Cara and Jordan in the studio.
Thanks, Jayce. And Johnny might be facing some competition when he comes back.
Yeah, Jayce came to me since I'm in charge of the show this week, and you know what he said? He said, please give me This Week in History. So I said, all right, let's make a trade, Jayce, and I took fact check from him. So this week, I'm going to debunk some myths for you. And as always, there's misinformation on the internet and beyond, and part of our job here at The Update is to debunk these myths and fallacies. Our first falsehood of the day comes from last Sunday on Easter. After it was announced by Joe Biden and the White House that March 31st would be recognized as Transgender Day of Visibility across the United States, many took to social media to criticize the president for placing it on the same day as Easter this year. Folks, the truth here is that Trans Day of Visibility has been held annually every March 31st since 2010, and Easter's date changes every year. Our next fake news item comes from the United Arab Emirates. In a post swung around social media, it was reported that the UAE had severed diplomatic ties with Israel due to an Israel bombing run in Gaza, which killed 7 volunteers working for the World Central Kitchen charity. In reality, there's no evidence of either nation splitting with each other, with neither making an official statement on the matter. And like I said, I took fact check from Jayce this week, but that guy, he drives a hard bargain, and he said, give me for your consideration.
Yeah, so that's why we're going to send it back out to Jayce with something he'd like for us to consider.
Thanks, Jordan. Thank you so much for your consideration. I was going to keep fact check too, but I had to give to the poor. But, for this week, I want to look at the history of some of the nations and how we really Americanize the way we look at these histories. This year alone, we've seen crises in Haiti, Armenia, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, not to mention several years of tensions in the Middle East. However, American media tends to overlook these issues until they affect America directly, and when they do finally address these issues, very little regard is given to a nation's history. Take the fall of Baghdad I mentioned earlier. For a good portion of America, the history of Iraq began in 1980 and ended in 2006. But Iraq, being one of the oldest regions in the world, has centuries of history which have brought us to where we are today. Ottoman occupation, British mandates, puppet governments. Let me restart that. 3, 2, 1. Take the fall of Baghdad I mentioned earlier. For a good portion of America, the history of Iraq began in 1980 and ended in 2006. But Iraq, being one of the oldest regions in the world, has centuries of history which have brought us to where we are today. Ottoman occupation, British mandates, puppet governments by Europe, proxy wars with Iran funded by America, and then an American invasion to oust a dictator we once supported. When taking all this into account, the difficulties within Iraq shift away from Iraq good, America bad, to Iraq has centuries of exploitation and meddling, which can be traced to our current situation. The same can be said for almost any nation. America is nearly 250 years old, making it one of the youngest nations in the world. So when we come into conflict or a friendship with an older nation, we have to take their history into account as well when we pass judgment. That's all I have this week, so I'm going to send it back to Cara and Jordan in the studio.
Thanks for that, Jayce, and thank you for tuning in to The Update tonight, where you'll find all your news and politics.
Tune in next week for more updates from the local level to the nationwide level.
From The Update, I'm Jordan Tovar.
And I'm Cara Dulin. Have a wonderful night.